Ancient Conquest is a game that was originally published in the 70s and has recently been reprinted in a new edition by Excalibur. I picked up this copy at Gen Con 2014 a couple of months ago, but only recently did I find the time to play it. I picked it up even though I didn't know anything about the game. I hadn't played the original one. I was too young, definitely. I was still in diapers when it came out. Um, and I hadn't heard anything about this new edition. I was just curious, and at Gen Con, really, there aren't many war games. I wanted to come home with at least one war game in my bag, and this is one of the few selections that I could make. This is a game that is set in the Middle East, and it depicts a pretty broad range of time. It's a war game, civilization game. Civilization because of the theme, not really because you do all the stuff like building, technology, etc., etc. But because of the general theme, it's a war game with a civilization theme that spans from approximately the 16th to the 7th century BC. And it represents four groups of people that come and go, move around, may get exterminated, try to achieve a large number of different objectives. It's a fairly long game. This side represents four groups. Solitaire suitability is low. Technically, it could be very high because there isn't any hidden information. There is some. There is a diplomacy phase, but if you're playing solitaire, you can simply skip that. This game could easily be adapted. It's just that having to keep track of four groups, and these groups have very different objectives and very long lists of objectives, would probably get a little confusing if you're trying to control all the groups by yourself at the best of your possibilities. Let me show you how the game plays. The game is played on this large paper map, which may not be breathtaking in terms of graphics, but actually looks nice enough. It is readable, it looks functional. I like it, or I would say I would like it if it wasn't that there is a major discrepancy between what you see on the map and the rules. The rules make a big deal about red dot cities, cities identified by a red dot. And the rules go on explaining that these cities are the most important ones historically, the ones that were key, the ones that were walled, etc., etc., etc. But then you look at the cities represented by red dots, which are not even red dots, it's really brown dots, but they are the minor ones. The big ones, like Babylon, Mari, Damascus, they are not represented by dots, they're represented by this symbol here. So I took it that the major discrepancy simply means that what the rulebook describes as red dot cities is actually the cities represented by the icon of the red dot. That's the way I played it and the way it makes sense to me. The game portrays the struggles of four groups, each group represented by counters of a different color, and units are have two factors printed on them. One of them is combat factor and the other factor is movement. So groups controlled by each player are labeled by the color. So you have a player with the purple color, blue color, and red color, and so on and so forth. But within that, within the total units controlled by a player, units are also labeled in subgroups that behave differently, enter the game in different times following the order of appearance chart. And also, each group has a player aid that tells you the objectives that each subgroup within the group is trying to achieve. For example, the Kingdom of Elam is trying to achieve these things, the Hittites are trying to achieve these things, the Cimmerians, the Israel, the chosen people. And they can be different things, from destroying stuff, from moving to certain objectives, occupying things. groups, I would say subgroups, come and go during the game, and they score points as they complete their objectives. So you may have groups a group that wins the game even though the group is not on the board at the end of the game, simply because even though the group was completely destroyed, it completed all of the objectives. Now, how does a turn work? At the beginning of each turn, you have the diplomacy phase. During the diplomacy phase, players can exchange messages only in written form. They have to write them down on a piece of paper. The rules say, I guess, that today you could use cell phones. Each player is only allowed to send one message, and then after messages have been received, each player can only send one reply. Doesn't matter how many messages you received. This is, the rules say, to simulate troubles in communication at the time, limited communication. I don't mind that limitation. I actually like the fact that things happen in written form. Not 100% sure that it's a great way of implementing this, or implementing the limitations in communication at the time. But there is that. Then players alternate activating their units, trying to achieve their objectives, and as you can see, as we said, each group has different types of objectives, so you will have units that are trying to achieve very different things in different parts of the game. Imagine, if I were to ask, imagine the simplest old-style game rules that you can think of as a seasoned war gamer. What are the most simple structure of a turn, the most simple course of events? Probably you would say, well, the units that you activated first move, then once you're done moving, you can attack adjacent units. You total the combat factor of the attacker, that of the opponent, divide total of the attacker by that of the opponent, turn that into a ratio, look at a table. Look for the column with that ratio, roll a die modifying that based on effects given by terrain, and you will see the result in your play result, which may be a retreat, maybe a unit is destructed, an exchange. Yes, you guessed it right. This is, at its core, the most simple turn structure that you have in old school war games. This makes it an excellent introductory war game if you're trying to show and to teach the basic concepts of war games. It is pretty much move, attack, destroy or be destroyed, try to complete objectives. If you have the result draw an omen, then you roll on this chart, and as far as I understand, most of these effects mean nothing. The rules seem to imply, I'm not 100% sure, there are so many gray areas in the rules, that all of these results are just for flavor. So basically this means a no result. All of these results are just for flavor, with the except of result number 6, which is a plague, and in which case actually you do apply effects. But if the result is Beaver Griggs Bane Gifts, I can see how that has no meaning whatsoever. But what if it says your attack is mode says the blood of a goat? Sounds great, but doesn't mean that is a game effect that I need to apply. I played it that, tried it just flavor with the effect of a plague, but of course that won't happen very often. This is it. Ta-da! Just taught you the game. Just a couple of other things. There are some limitations based on stacking. Nothing too strange. Nothing unusual there. Siege result charts. Use this chart here when you are resolving combat against a red dot city, or better, a walled city. And you continue like this, turn after turn, for a very long time. This is a pretty long game, until the game is over. At that point, you tally points and you see who the winner is. There are some extra optional rules, there are some extra ways in which objectives are completed, but I think it's better that I taught you the basic concept of the game. They told you about the core ideas of the game, if I talk about the extra elements in my conclusions. This is a game that I didn't know much about. As I started reading the rules, there were gray areas, but I was still pretty excited because the game was so simple. I'm always looking for introductory war games that I can use to introduce new players to the hobby, especially younger players. It scares me when I think that I'm one of the youngest war gamers that I know. I want to bring the joy to new generations. Could this be a way of doing it? I don't think so. I don't think this is a good game to introduce new players. For a variety of reasons, this is not a good example of a nice integration between theme and mechanics. I love theme. I love games that drip, that ooze with theme. But the theme needs to be part of the engine, part of the philosophy, the personality of the game. You can't just paste it on. You can't just paint it on. One can tell. Here you have a core rules which is very simple, very basic, and very generic too. And then you have all these bits and pieces of theme that really don't go together. They feel gratuitous. The fact that, for example, that there's a rule that says that you can use counters to represent wives that the kings send to one another as a sign of good fate. So you put the wife counter on the board, you move it, you send it to destination, and that's it. That's all it does. There's no other effect on the game. It says it helps you diplomatically because it shows your good fate. Really? I could just send the counter to you and then stab in the back. There's still no rule that says anything about it. The Omen chart could have been an opportunity to have a more varied set of effects. It just gives you sentences that, ooh, I feel like I'm living in the 12th century before the current era now. No, not really. It's not that what gives me that feeling. To me, it just feels as cheap as if there was an optional rule that says that you can rent costumes and dress up like the ancient populations that you are representing. Would that really bring theme to the game? Would make it fun and ridiculous, but this is not a good way of representing theme in a game. There's also another aspect that's connected to this. Feel free to be offended. There is a rule that deals with the captivity of the chosen people in Egypt, and Pharaoh that didn't want to let them go, then lets them go, and they go to the promised land. There is a rule. There's a set of rules to simulate that. First, again, that doesn't feel organic with the rest of the game. And also, it's unclear what happens if Pharaoh says, no, you stay here. There's no rule that sends the plagues. But there is another problem here, that there is no archaeological or historical evidence that these events actually happened. The Bible is pretty much the only source about these events. If you believe the Bible to be inherent and literally true, and you believe the historicity of these events based on the Bible, feel free. That's perfectly fine. But the point is that these events are accepted on faith, not by the same historical standards by which we evaluate, for example, facts regarding the lives of Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great. Or other facts that are supposed to be contemporary to those events. So if you want to accept it on faith, I'm not complaining about that. I'm complaining about a game that blends facts that are demonstrably historical with facts that are based on individual religious faith, and blends them together without acknowledging that there is a difference in them. And that bugs me. That, to me, undermines further the credibility of the project. The game, I'm echoing Enrico Viglino's opinions here, feels very generic, and even though you have combat tables, you have movement ratings, you have the odds ratio thing, a staple in wargaming, doesn't feel much like a wargame. It is so generic. It feels like an abstract game. It feels really like you're pushing little pieces of cardboard trying to do lot too many things, way too many things for them to remain exciting, for you to be able to concentrate on a task rather than the other, to be able to figure out exactly what the opponent is trying to achieve. And maybe you kind of learn what that group is trying to achieve, but now another group comes and you forget. The game feels very fragmented because of this. You forget what your people are trying to do, forget taking into account what the opponent may be trying to do, and work with that. So there's also that problem. The game feels a little dispersive and generic and not very historical or thematic, which is ironic when you have so much effort on putting theme. But again, if the theme is so superficial, so shallow, what is the point? Last but alas, really not least, this is a game that is too long for what it has to offer. I am not scared by long games. I'm playing Unconditional Surrender these days. I'm playing a campaign game. I play for like 12 hours. I probably have some 20-30 hours to go before the campaign game is over. And I'm happy because that game has enough meat to nourish my interest as the game progresses. What could be a strength here, the simple core lean of rules that can be used as an introduction to wargaming, works well in a game that lasts half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, maybe two. This game takes longer than that, and it feels repetitive, it feels bland. It definitely drags on for way too long. When you do not have more nuances to work with, you do not have more aspects of the theme that you are actively, truly implementing through gameplay. When you're trying to achieve all these small strategic things without being able to get the sense of an overarching narrative, that to me is a problem, especially if all this lasts for hours and hours and hours. Not enough meat, not enough ideas, not enough challenges and rewards to keep players hooked for the time it takes to bring the game to completion. Something good to say about this game, I don't want to sound too harsh. The box looks nice, it's pretty sturdy. Other than that, starting from the manual that is riddles with holes and gray areas, going on to the actual gameplay, this is a game that for a new player that is not in love with the game already, from some 30 years ago, this is a game that really has little to offer. A list, not for me, really. I forgive you if you loved it back in the day, not your fault. That was the 70s, you were younger, you were in high school. But there are many things from back then that probably you don't need to bring back into your life. It's maybe that Ancient Conquest is one of those.